All last week, I was warning about the prospect of full-scale war in the Middle East, and today it seems to have started. After the explosive pager attacks and the assassination of the leader of Hezbollah, Israeli special forces began to move across the Lebanese border, and the tanks prepared for a full ground invasion. In a purely military sense, their operations so far have been brilliant. And by the way, I don't think we should regard the killing of Hezbollah leaders as particularly outrageous compared to, for instance, the slaughter of civilian bystanders. In fact, if more countries at war with one another started off by trying to kill opposing leaders rather than killing soldiers or bombing cities, then perhaps, we would have fewer wars. But this is exactly the problem. Israel has killed so many people in Gaza and now in Lebanon that it's created a circle of hatred all around itself. Tomorrow's suicide bombers, tomorrow's enemies. For much of the world, the notion of Israel as a peaceable, democratic, cultured haven, the Israel so many of us admired for so long, is being pounded away in smoke and gunfire. From Brazil to South Africa, it's now seen as a ruthless, no-compromise military state, uninterested in the numbers of mere outsiders, Muslims or Palestinians or Lebanese, who die whenever it's threatened. And that is surely very dangerous for Israel. Again today, Britain's been calling for restraint. We might as well be singing songs to the wind to try to stop it from blowing. Longer term, whatever its stunning battlefield successes, I fear the state of Israel is playing a dangerous game with its very future. But then I'm a relentless optimist, and it was interesting that tonight Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed an appeal not to Israelis, but to Iranians.
With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. The vast majority of Iranians know their regime doesn't care a whit about them. If it did care, if it cared about you, it would stop wasting billions of dollars on futile wars across the Middle East. It would start improving your lives.
Well, joining me now from the Conservative Conference in Birmingham is the former Cabinet Minister and Shadow Foreign Secretary, Andrew Mitchell. Andrew, great to have you on the show. Extraordinary, really, to hear Benjamin Netanyahu directly talking to the Iranian people. He seems to think that the entire region might be on the verge of a kind of revolution, particularly in countries like Syria and even in Iran itself.
Well, we must hope that is true, because the point that Netanyahu made about Iran and its regime not serving its people is one, I think, which we can all agree with and support. And, of course, we should remember tonight that Israel has the right of self-defense. After October the 8th, indeed, on October the 8th, the first shells were sent over the border into northern Israel by Hezbollah, and they've been doing it ever since. And, more than 70,000 people have had to leave their homes in northern Israel and have been unable to go back since that date. So I think, we should be very clear that what is required now is for Hezbollah to lay down their weapons and retire behind the Litani River in accordance with UN Security Council Resolution 1701. And then for all of us in the international community to try and get everyone to focus on building on the Abraham Accords and looking at a comprehensive peace settlement for the Middle East. Never forget, Andy, that the progress at Oslo was made on the back of the Intifada.
It certainly was. Let me ask you about the current government, who have said, who have appealed for a ceasefire, appealed for a pause, and asked the Israelis not to launch a ground invasion of Lebanon. And that also appears to be the view of President Joe Biden. What's your view? Should they pause before they go ahead?
Well, Israel has the right of self-defense, and they are being shelled by Hezbollah over the border. Innocent women and children's lives are threatened as a result of Hezbollah, an internationally recognized terrorist regime prescribed by the United Kingdom and the European countries and by America. And they must stop. And if they won't stop, then Israel has the right of self-defense to stop them.
So if the tanks go over the border tonight, they do so with your support?
Well, they have to make the best judgment about how they exercise their right to self-defense. But I think it's very hard to argue, as I think a point you made in your opening introduction, that the world isn't a better place without the removal of the leader of Hezbollah. And remember, too, that Al-Qaeda and ISIL ceased really to be effective terrorist organizations when their leaders were removed, and the removal of the leader of Hezbollah, I hope, will cause Hezbollah to follow the same route.
Let me ask you also about the Lebanese foreign minister, who has said tonight that 56 Arab and Muslim countries will come together to guarantee Israel's security if Israel starts talks on a two-state solution with its capital in East Jerusalem. That seems to be a kind of offer that Israel would find it hard to brush aside easily.
It's a very encouraging development, but also remember, Hezbollah is despised and detested in many parts of Lebanon. Many of us were so pleased to see yesterday that an Iranian plane bringing to Lebanon goodness knows what was turned back and not allowed to land. It is absolutely essential that Hezbollah now lay down their weapons and withdraw behind the Litani River, and I think everyone of goodwill will support the stopping of Hezbollah causing this mayhem in northern Israel.
The United States and the UK have both pleaded for restraint from Israel and have been so far completely ignored by Mr. Netanyahu, who clearly thinks he is winning militarily, on the ground, force is effective and is working for him. What do you think his end game needs to be?
Well, it's perfectly clear, and it's been the objective of the British Conservative government, and I'm sure is the objective now of the Labour government and the Foreign Office, that we need to lift people's eyes when this ghastly situation ends and the firing and fighting stops, to the political solution and the possibility of a regional settlement. That's why what the Lebanese Foreign Minister has said tonight is so important and attractive. But in terms of calling for a ceasefire, the right of Israel to defend itself, the right of it to deal with these rockets coming across from Hezbollah is not, I think, in dispute. And in anyone within the Israeli administration trying to work out how to act now, at this moment, having a ceasefire when they've got Hezbollah on the run would seem to me to be a very surprising course of military action.
Andrew, picking up something that one of the possible future leaders of your party has said today, do you think people coming into the UK, into airports or ports or wherever, should see a Star of David as one of the first things they see?
Well, I think there are many things that they should see when they come into the airports, like the
But you know what I'm talking about.
The Britain is great posters, which you see whenever you go through one of our major airports, and it's always, to me, a matter of pride to see that.
Yes, and Robert Jenrick has said there should be a Star of David there to show our absolute support for Israel under all circumstances. Do you agree with him?
Well, Britain is a staunch ally of Israel. It was British men and women in the military and British weaponry that was used to defend Israel when Iran was lobbing rockets directly from Iran into Israel. And there should be no doubt about our support for Israel.
I think that was a very elegant and loquacious no, if I may say so. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew Mitchell. Now let's talk next to an unusual American diplomat. Jeffrey Feltman has served all over, including the United States Embassy in Tel Aviv, as well as being his country's ambassador in Lebanon. Since then, he has announced his support for Palestinian statehood, and he joins me now. Very, very good to see you there, Mr. Feldman. Can I ask you also about Ayman Stefadi, the foreign minister of Jordan, his statement today when he said on the fringes of the United Nations that 56 Arab and Muslim countries want to come together to guarantee the security of Israel in return for Israel accepting the need for Palestinian statehood and a two-state solution. What do you make of that? Is this a significant moment, do you think?
I think this is an opportunity. But looking more narrowly at that initiative, what I find interesting is that the Lebanese government has now put space between its position and Hezbollah's position. Hezbollah, as your previous speaker has noted, has said that they will continue to fire into Israel despite the losses. until there's a ceasefire in Gaza. The Lebanese government is now saying, we want to be part of the implementation of that Security Council resolution from 2006, which is clearing the area of southern Lebanon from all armed elements except for the Lebanese armed forces. So I think there's an opportunity now for diplomacy because you have a distinction between the government of Lebanon and Hezbollah in terms of their approaches to how you end this war.
I was asking at the top of the show, I don't know if you could hear it, about what the end game might be for Israel and whether huge military success might end up with, as it were, political failure. But your answer to that seems to be that we are quite close to a proper, peaceful ending of this very, very long-running conflict to the north of Israel.
I wish I could say that. I wish I could agree with that. What I'm saying is that there's an opportunity now that I don't think that we've had before, where the Lebanese government has basically hidden behind Hezbollah's positions. Now that there's a distinction between the two. When I look at Israel, I think that you have a confluence of Israel's strategic objectives of rebalancing the forces in the Middle East, of trying to put Iran on its back foot, the tactical goals, which is to find a way to allow the people who had to leave their homes in northern Israel to go home, and Netanyahu's self-political interest. Netanyahu has been widely loathed by his population for a number of reasons, trying to overthrow the judiciary, the lack of any kind of preparedness or understanding before the October 7th massacre. But now he's got the Israeli public with him on the idea of hitting back against Hezbollah. So hitting back against Hezbollah strategically tries to rebalance the forces of the Middle East. It tactically tries to clear the area so that people can go back to their homes, and politically helps Netanyahu revive his forces inside Israel. Yeah. That doesn't mean it's going to work. We saw in 1982 and in 2006, Israel starts off very, very strongly, but doesn't always end up with the results that they intended.
The wise words. We saw, of course, big crowds mourning the death of Nasrallah in Lebanon, but also big crowds celebrating it in Syria, where the anti-Assad Syrians are absolutely with what the Israelis have done. Do you think we are quite close to some kind of general sort of revolutionary transformation of the Middle East, given what's happening?
I don't think so. And I don't think so for a couple of reasons. One is inside Lebanon, where this could happen, I think you're going to see caution, reticence. The Lebanese have been through civil war. They know what happened after the Israeli invasion in 1982 when the Christians asserted their power, only to have Bashir Gemayel, the Christian president, assassinated later, bloodletting on all sides. I think the Lebanese are going to be very, very cautious in a way that they might lose this opportunity. There's a vacuum right now for leadership in Lebanon. Vacuums do not last. And now is the time for the Lebanese to come together and try to build a consensus behind a president that could be a president for all of Lebanon. Lebanon's had a presidential vacuum since November of 2022 because of polarization in the parliament. Bring together the people that came out into the street back in 2019. You may remember that the Lebanese had very compelling demonstrations to try to change their system in 2019. That was snuffed out, both by Hezbollah fighters on the street as well as by the financial collapse. I think now Lebanon has an opportunity to come together to try to fix the system, to have Lebanon become a state again, now that the state within the state, Hezbollah, has been weakened. But I'm rather pessimistic that this will happen, because I think people will tend to be cautious for fear of setting off a sectarian war.
Well, still on the cautious side, I suppose, is there not a danger that if possibly later on today Israel launches a full-scale ground invasion of southern Lebanon, that war atmosphere, as it were, ends any possibility of an independent Lebanese position, of them distancing themselves from Hezbollah? The emotions of being attacked take over.
Yes, I mean, I saw this in 2006. I was the U.S. ambassador to Lebanon in 2006, and when Hezbollah launched the cross-border raid in 2006, killing and kidnapping Israeli soldiers inside Israel, triggering that war, the majority of Lebanese were furious. The majority of Lebanese said, "Why in the world did Hezbollah drag us into a war? We did not vote for war. Hezbollah has brought us into an adventure that we had no say in, and it's affecting our lives. It's ruining our economy and our summer." After the Israelis invasion began, the ground invasion began, and moved northward, then you saw solidarity among the Lebanese against the Israelis. And I expect that we'll see the same thing now, that even those Lebanese who are relieved that they're no longer hostage to Hassan Nasrallah will not welcome the Israeli ground invasion. They've seen that movie before, and they really don't want to see the sequel.
They have indeed. I find that very illuminating. I'm sure everybody listening did as well. Mr. Feltman, thank you so much for talking to me.